When it's red?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
down below. This one,
It's red up
There we
there,
go.
Mike.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. And this is being broadcast, is that correct? Hope, okay, to the broader Arlington community. The first thing I have to do before we get started on the content of the work session is bring Libby into this through the remote process. And by the code, I believe I'm required to read this. I've been notified by Libby Garvey that she is unable to attend today's meeting because of a temporary disability that prevents her physically attending the meeting, and that she would like to participate by phone from South 14th Street in Arlington. This is allowed by law, and the board's policy and arrangements have been made for her participation. So I'm asking the clerk to record Libby's notification in the minutes of today's meeting. And Libby is already connected, so she'll be connected momentarily, but so we'll have all 5 board members here. So, Hi, Libby, is that you?
It's me.
All right, thank you. You are now connected, and we're just about to start the work session.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Okay, thanks to the staff for helping design this work session, and Dominion as well. You're a significant part of this. It's an opportunity today to spend some time with you and really focus on a number of questions. You're a huge player across the Commonwealth, and certainly here in Arlington, as you know, we keep this community moving forward. So today, some of the goals of the work session are to provide an overview of our own Streetlight program, knowing that this year during the budget process, that was one of the visible, points of discussion, adding some staff to that as a response to some of the questions in the community. Providing information from you all, from Dominion, about how you do your repairs and operate and maintain the streetlights that you have in the county, which is the majority of them. Providing an overview on the process to convert those existing Dominion streetlights to LED technology in the county. That's something we'll talk about today. And then for all of us, getting a better overview and understanding of the VEPCA, and we'll get into that later about what that stands for, agreement that regulates the construction and maintenance of streetlights, and talk about the process underway in the negotiations that'll culminate in 2018. So those are the goals. I think we're all looking forward to a full, robust hour and 50 minutes. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the first part of the presentation, where we do an overview of our streetlight program and go through some of we'll be covering some material we've already covered with the board during budget, but also an update on that. I'm going to turn it over to Dennis Leach to give you that summary.
Thank you very much. And I'm just waiting for the presentation to come up. So this presentation is in three parts. So the first part is the overview of the county's streetlight program, then followed by the Dominion energy presentation, then a presentation by John Morell of staff on the VEPCA agreement. So first, the overview of the county streetlight program. We have roughly 19,000 streetlights in Arlington, and that portfolio is really split up into three buckets. You can see that the county's portion of that portfolio is a little over 7,300, or about 38%. VDOT has a very small portfolio of lights, mostly around the interstate interchanges. And then the majority of lights, as Chairman Fazette referenced, are owned and managed by Dominion, roughly 11,200 streetlights. And those portfolios are intermixed. So in places like the Rosslyn-Ballston corridor, the majority of lights are Arlington owned and maintained, but there are Dominion lights. And then as you get further out into the neighborhoods, the balance shifts to mostly Dominion ownership. These next couple of slides just get into the diversity. This is Clarendon Boulevard. Most of the lights adjacent to our site plan buildings are Arlington owned and maintained, but you notice the D in the median of Washington Boulevard in Clarendon, those are Dominion lights. So you may have two different ownerships, two different maintenance regimes on the same street. Shifting now to another part of Rosslyn-Ballston corridor, this is Fairfax Drive in Ballston. We have the same thing. We have a mix on Fairfax Drive of both county-owned, maintained streetlights intermingled with Dominion stock. And over time, we've accumulated a diversity of luminaire and pole types across Arlington and Dominion. By and large, the Arlington portfolio is mostly, but not exclusively, what is called the Carlisle fixture. We do have some LED Cobras as well, and Dominion has mostly Cobras, but also a lot of coach lights that are off to the far right. And we have briefed the board before, but we are continuing an effort on a streetlight management plan. This is a plan for how we operate and maintain and invest in streetlights. The goal of this plan is really an administrative document that informs our decision-making about the planning, design, operation, and maintenance of street lighting in Arlington. Some components include technical standards, a plan for ownership, and a plan for maintenance, and priorities for implementing streetlight projects improvements. And we are making substantial headway. The benchmarking study has been completed by a consultant with a substantial staff work. We are immersed right now in looking at technology and technical standards, and we anticipate having a final document to share with the board at the end of this calendar year. We have established a community stakeholders working group to provide input to staff on this, and we also see Dominion as a key stakeholder that we will be working with going forward as we try to rationalize this portfolio. And the guiding principles for our SMP is that our street lighting program needs to be safe, sustainable, compatible, smart, maintainable, and cost-effective. And some of these principles, there's a tension, so it's actually getting the right balance. But for us as staff, safety is paramount, but we also need to pay attention to these other factors as well. And the county has been a leader, both in the region and nationally, on LED street light technology deployment. We received an ARA grant that got us started on this journey, and have had a generally very positive experience, where our conversion to LED has yielded really substantial maintenance benefits, fewer maintenance hours to support those lights, much lower use of electricity over time, and really helps the county meet its community energy goals. And then I also want to touch on resources. So we had a robust conversation about the maintenance and management of the streetlight program. Again, this is really targeted at the slightly over a third, 38% of the lights that are Arlington owned and maintained, that we were not meeting community expectations given our staffing levels. So what we have here is what the consultant initially recommended out of the SMP study effort. The board did approve 3 additional staff resources for the upcoming fiscal year, and those are moving forward. We're going to be filling those hopefully late this summer, and some other supporting assets as well. And the whole idea behind that is to really improve the overall performance of the street lighting system. So improve response time to deal with outages, enhance coordination with Dominion, which is if a street light is reported out, it comes through our system, and then we are in turn working those outages cooperatively with Dominion. Every site plan, every use permit has a streetlight component, which means we need engineering capacity to do the effective review, timely review of those. And on the Arlington side of the ledger, most of our streetlights have underground conduit, and so any repairs or replacement of underground conduit requires engineering expertise. So this allows us to improve that throughput as well. And then you see at the bottom, we do anticipate substantial reductions in response times, reducing the delay for responding to routine outages, cutting that in half, and a fairly dramatic reduction in the more complicated undergrounding outages. And I will say, as we get to the Dominion presentation, we track things a little differently in how, particularly in that second bullet of the undergrounding work. And then I lastly want to touch on the coordination, and the coordination is substantial and ongoing. We have regular coordination meetings with Dominion where we track response times, we discuss major outages. We have expedited permitting to allow Dominion to respond in a more timely way. We will be engaging Dominion really for the remainder of the SMP process, given this split of Streetlight portfolio between Arlington and Dominion, and then establishing an annual review process for our entire program that looks at both county and Dominion outages. And lastly, and this is very important here in Arlington, is county customer service. We have made substantial changes in that. Residents can now report directly to the county, either through the website, through a mobile app, through social media or walk-in. So we take all of those formats. And then once reported, staff investigates the ownership. Is it an Arlington Light, a Dominion Light, or in rare occasions, a VDOT Light? And if it's county-owned, our residents can track the request and now receive regular updates. If it's a Dominion-owned light, the county staff inputs the issue into Dominion's system directly. And I will just reference, we were able to complete approximately 102 major projects given the financial resources the board provided for streetlight repairs. And then you can see, this is just the request page that a resident would use as one of the ways of getting information to us. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dominion.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Reamy, External Affairs Manager with Dominion Energy now. I've been assigned to Arlington County as your liaison to the board. So if you guys have any questions, concerns, I work through you all. The process that you guys have put in place with me to interface with Shannon Flanagan Watson has been working great. And so can't understate how good of a relationship we've had. Just to give you a little bit of background, I've been in this role for about a year now. Been with Dominion Energy for 11 years now, and I know a little bit more about the electrical background. So if you guys ever want to talk about anything in terms of Dominion, I'm happy to sit down and meet with y'all. With me is Jerry Northedge. She's our outdoor lighting program manager. She's been with the company for 23 years, current role for 6 years. She oversees lighting across the state of Virginia and North Carolina, so she's got a lot of expertise under her belt. She has got a background in design, reliability, and operations. And also with us is Deborah Johnson. She's our regional policy director in Northern Virginia. You might know Deborah from some time that you guys had spent together. She was previously assigned to my role. How many years ago? A long time ago. So she served on Community Energy Task Force. She's been on the board of directors for Arlington Chamber, Arlington Community Foundation, and was the chair of Leadership Arlington. So and I forgot to mention, I lived in Arlington for 4 years as well. So between the two of us, we've got some extensive knowledge of how Arlington works. So I want to take a quick moment to recognize the professionalism of the county staff. They've been great to work with. We've had several working meetings prior to this point, and everything has gone very well to this point. Whenever the county needs anything, we're able to respond, and whenever we need something, the county's able to respond. So I want to thank you guys for being open to dialogue all the time. Today we want to plan on talking about the status of streetlights in Arlington, our restoration process, LED technology, and customer service. But to get started, we need to touch on some of the contractual relationships that Dominion Energy shares with Arlington County through VEPCA. And I don't want to take anything away from John's presentation a little bit later, but there needs to be some baseline understanding of what VEPCA is, so we'll get started with that. Presentation should take about 20 minutes, and you can, we'll be happy to answer questions at the end. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Okay, sure. Sorry. Got it. Thank you, Scott. And as Scott stated, I know Mr. Morrill will have a presentation on VEPCA a little bit later. So this slide really is just an introduction because our partnership with Arlington as it pertains to streetlights is governed by this particular agreement. The Virginia Energy Purchasing Governmental Association, which is VEPCA, was organized back in 2002. It is the mechanism by which we bill Virginia municipalities. It has all of the terms and conditions and the rates associated with services that we provide to VEPCA members. As it pertains to streetlight service standards, some of the things that are highlighted in that portion of the contract would be the way outages are reported, and Dominion does depend on our customers, whether it's your residents, citizens of the county, or Arlington County staff, to report to us when an outage is out. And I'd say that because I think we do have a lot of citizens sometimes that think that when a light goes out that we know about it. There's some electronic process. Technology exists, but we don't have that technology in place yet. But so the outage report actually has to be passed on to us so we know to respond. There is a timeline for repairs also memorialized in the contract. It's different based on the type of repair that's required. There are multiple types of repairs: overhead repairs, underground repairs, and underground replacements. And what I'll say about that from the contract is that we have those certain timelines in place, and there are some exceptions, but we do have a streetlight refund process that we go through when we don't meet those dates. So again, just very high level to explain the relationship between Dominion and Arlington County. So we'll move on to the next slide, which is an overview of performance. We looked at last year's performance in 2016, and you can see the pie chart to the right. It's kind of a visual of that performance, and more than half of the outages reported to us in 2016 we completed restoration within 5 days. More than 80% of the outages reported to us were actually restored within 2 weeks. We had about 4% of streetlight outages reported to us took longer than 45 days to restore. And there are some extenuating circumstances at times that do lead to longer duration streetlight outages. Have some bulleted items up there just to touch on a few of those. If there's ongoing construction in an area, such as a new building or development, that can hinder, well, first of all, it could be potentially the cause of an outage. It also could hinder our ability to make repairs in a timely fashion. In some cases, we may have to wait until that construction is completed before we can restore service to lights. Also, we do have some situations where we may need to redesign existing streetlight feeds based on redevelopment or road improvements when there's road widening, or in the case of Arlington County, they've had several areas that have been completely redeveloped that have changed the underground infrastructure and our ability to maintain the infrastructure in place. So what redesign has to take place is we do have an engineering department that will look at that, look for a new source, and essentially basically we may be running all new facilities to those existing streetlight locations. That can be a timely process as well, working alongside developers and also our county partners to make that happen. Some of the outages do require specialized crews. Those specialized crews have a volume of work that is scheduled to them, so that can add to the timeline. What we have experienced a lot in recent years inside the Beltway has been streetlight outages as a result of third-party damage. And if you think about our streetlight facilities that are in public right-of-way, all of the underground facilities are in a very vulnerable location. Some of the facilities have been in place for quite some time. Not all are protected by a conduit. And even so, development, a lot of times, it doesn't matter if it's in conduit or not. You have that opportunity for damage and outages. And that's with other utilities doing work such as fiber installation and the redevelopment that I mentioned earlier, it just really gives that opportunity for damage. Those can be more complicated repair, restoration process for those types of projects. They may require new installation of underground cable and permitting requirements, et cetera. So we do understand that there are some of these projects that fall into those categories. I also like to touch on an initiative that we have for each of our streetlights in Arlington County for relamping. We do proactively relamp each one of the county lights once every 5 years, so that's about 2,300 lights every year that, whether they're working or not or have been reported out or not, it's on a routine schedule where we are going to touch that light, we're going to change the bulb, we're going to change the photocell that tells it when to go on and off, and we're going to do a health check on the facilities, the pole, and identify if there's any additional response or follow-up needed at each individual pole. If in the case of the technology, we're going to get into technology on another slide, but right now, the technology that we install is sodium vapor technology. The old technology was mercury vapor. If a mercury vapor fixture, when we're performing these health checks, if the bulb doesn't make the fixture come on, if the fixture's failed, we will bring that back in-house and come back out and replace that with a sodium vapor fixture. I'll move on to the next slide here. Busy slide, so I'm not going to talk through every piece of the process, but it's really intended to just give a visual of our restoration process at Dominion. There are sometimes some misconceptions when a light goes out from some residents that may have only the context of a light going out in their house where they change a bulb. In our case, for our streetlights that are in public right-of-way, there are multiple facilities that feed these lights, and there are multiple opportunities for failure at any given time for any one of those lights. So the way that process works, and I'll give an example, and again, this is the majority of the lights that we respond to, more than 50% of what we respond to, we go out with one of our first responders, and if it's just a bulb or a photocell that's failed, we make that repair right on site, and that project is completed, restoration's complete. So you do have the majority of lights that first time we're out there, we're able to fix it. Take another example in the case of a first responder identifying that it's not the bulb, it's not the photocell, it's not the fixture, it's an underground issue. Then that project comes back in for a specialized underground repair crew. Scheduled to that crew, we send it out. If that underground repair crew is not able to be successful with repairs, it could be that the cable's too damaged and we identify that it needs to be replaced. That's a different set of equipment, a different type of crew. So we end up having to schedule that to one of our cable replacement crews who returns to replace the cable. And immediately after that, typically within a week after that work's completed, we have another set of resources that will come out and actually make the connections to energize that. So just an explanation of how, and I'll touch on this too as part of that process. There are oftentimes permit applications involved. We work with the county to get the appropriate permits, and that can be a piece of the timeline as well. So you have some projects that may take just a few days, other projects that may carry on for weeks, and that's not considering any extenuating circumstances if we have any obstacles that prevent us from being able to work through each piece of that process. Those are small amount. As I mentioned on the previous slide, less than 4% actually passed the 45-day mark for restoration. But the reason we mention that is those are typically probably the ones that the county and Dominion receives inquiries about throughout the year if they're long-term outages. And we want to make sure that we're talking about those things. So some of the process improvements we've implemented recently, and Dennis touched on it, quarterly updates with the county. So we have a great working relationship with the county staff when it comes to streetlights and discussing that. If there's any long-term outages that are past that duration that most would find acceptable, those are the projects that on a quarterly basis we're going to sit down and talk about in depth. And we already have, we've actually implemented, we had a first quarter meeting and we have a second quarter meeting scheduled where we can talk through each of those projects, what's transpired with the project, what status it's in, what are some of the challenges. And what that does is, residents that have streetlights that are out, we understand that there's concern there, and we don't want to delay restoration any more than is necessary. So what that does is at least gives information and some context so that the county, if the county ends up receiving any inquiries about those particular lights, they can speak to the situation, give a status update, and then also in turn communicate back with us at Dominion if there are any of those long-term outages that we need to work together on to try to expedite as much as possible. Again, none of these projects go on any back burner. It's just a matter of making sure we're doing the right thing and working through the right process so that we can provide reliable service once those lights are restored, and that we're doing it safely as well. Another improvement that we've been focused on internally at Dominion is utilizing resources that we have within the company that can assist with some of these more complicated restoration projects. We're an operations team. We have a dedicated group of repair resources. They're field resources, and that work only on streetlight repairs. But there are some of these more complicated projects that require a different skill set, and so we've tapped that local design, our engineers locally in our local office here to help us with some of those complex projects. And what we find with that is that they also have a relationship with the county from a permitting perspective and from understanding the design piece, and they can give their expertise to try to move the project along a little bit quicker and ensure that what we're doing is going to get the lights restored as quickly as possible. So internally, we've been utilizing that group a little bit more than what we had in the past. And the third bullet up there for process improvement is something Dennis touched on as well. We work with the county on obtaining permits when necessary, depending on what type of restoration work we need to do for streetlights, primarily when we have to replace cable and there's some sort of traffic control involved. We're cognizant of the fact that in Arlington County, it's not necessarily a good thing to shut down lanes of traffic or to impede. So we try to work with the county to obtain those permits and do the work at the right time. And the county has been very helpful in expediting permits for us in situations where we know there's a public concern and there are some elevated inquiries on those outages. Having a shortened duration to receive a permit back helps with the timeline to get the restoration done. So we're very thankful for that. And we do understand that the county's also working on internally some changes to their permitting process in the future that would provide more of an electronic opportunity that would, I believe, would probably impact the timeline even more positively. Switch gears a little bit to the technology piece we talked about. Dominion does have an LED program. Right now, it's strictly for our VEPCA members. Internally, we developed a steering committee Late last year, we kicked it off, and the purpose of that steering committee is to establish a roadmap, if you will, for what our program at Dominion for LED should look like going forward. One of the things that our steering committee has already done and will probably continue to do is we do solicit input from municipal customers. In fact, Arlington County was one of the customers that we had solicited input from for the steering committee earlier this year. We had asked some questions about potential future LED fixtures and asked for Arlington County to give some feedback on what type of fixtures they may be interested in seeing us offer as standard offerings when we move forward. We are in the process of reviewing our current offerings, such as the sodium vapor offerings that are that exist right now, and also exploring any future LED offerings. We currently offer 2 different fixtures for LED, a roadway fixture, which is sometimes called a Cobra style fixture, and you see that up on the top right-hand side illustrated there. It comes in a few different sizes. And then also a decorative option, very similar to what Arlington County, the type of post-top streetlights that Arlington County has installed throughout, and that would be the Carlisle Acorn. It's a decorative acorn LED fixture, post-top pictured on the bottom right there. We do have conduct internally at Dominion a biannual review of our LED rates. The LED rates that we offer right now for those 2 fixtures are in the current VEPCA contract, and part of the last contract negotiations did include a biannual review, and what that means is we had agreed to not wait the full 4 years between contract terms, that after just 2 years, we would go and look at the rates and do a cost of service evaluation to determine if there was any opportunity to change those rates. The purpose was to ensure that if there was any way to make the rate more attractive for our municipal customers, that we'd be able to do so before waiting for the next contract negotiation. So in 2016, July of 2016, the cost of service was completed, and it didn't result in any changes to the rates. And I believe that the feedback that we received on that was that when the rates were, in the last contract, when the rates were negotiated, the cost of the LED fixture that we offer on standards at the time was extrapolated out 5 years to anticipate what the cost of the fixture would decrease over a 5-year period. So we didn't actually use the active, the cost of the fixture at the time. We used what we anticipated the cost would be in 5 years, and it had not gotten down to that level back in last summer. The rate itself that we provide that's in VEPCA does include a maintenance, the material and the labor to maintain all of the streetlights. It does include some sort of replacement component, so it considers that over a number of years we'll have to replace a certain number of poles, certain amount of cable. Small component of the rate, but it's in there, is the actual energy that the streetlights use. So when you're comparing like a sodium vapor and an LED streetlight in terms of Dominion's rate building structure, there is a difference in the energy component, but the energy component is a much smaller piece of the rate than the actual maintenance of the complete installation for the streetlight circuit. In the existing contract right now, we do offer a reduced monthly rate for upgrades, and what that looks like is that if Arlington County has a number of streetlights that Dominion maintains, such as Cobra lights, that Dominion maintains, there's the option to request those lights be upgraded to an LED Cobra fixture. And if the light was existing and it's not a brand new installation, then there's a separate set of rates that are much more consistent with the current sodium vapor rate schedule, And in some cases, depending on what the conversion looks like, it actually could be a reduced monthly rate from the existing light that was in the field. That applies to conversions only. For new installations, it's a different rate schedule, or not a different rate schedule, but a different rate structure. But the conversions do have some sort of an incentive with that decreased rate. In 2018, and John Morrell will probably get into this more with his presentation, sorry, John, we just wanted to identify that I know there are some questions from the county about our LED program or our offerings, and those are all things that are going to be on the table with the upcoming negotiations, such as conversion rate. Right now, if you convert to LED, even though you may receive a lower monthly rate, you have to have that upfront capital to pay Dominion to go out and actually do the work to convert the light, the physical work to convert the light. And there's a material component to that. There's a labor component to that. There is not a flat rate offering for that conversion at this time. So that's something that I can see being considered in future, for future contracts, but I don't have any more information than that at this time. And Dennis also talked about a very important piece of Streetlight, our Streetlight program, and the county Streetlight program would be the customer service piece. Like, what is the experience for your citizens? And we've made some significant upgrades in our customer service for streetlights in recent years. Specifically, what I'll touch on here is our outage reporting for residents, as well as our web page and web content. Just a few short years ago, if you went into Dominion's online system, if you went to our website and typed in streetlight outages or lighting outages, there was no content. So that's why I say we've made some significant changes where we actually have a full web page with lots of detailed information. First and foremost, for the county customer, such as Arlington County themselves, we do offer a streetlight outage reporting system that's not available to the public, but that's the system where the county can actually see all of a map of all of the lights and the locations. There was a visual put up by Dennis earlier that was the Arlington County map, and the Dominion streetlight outage reporting system has only Dominion streetlights on it, but by clicking on a light to report a light outage, it creates an immediate work request that's then immediately available for dispatch to our first responders. For your citizens here, for residential customers or even commercial customers, they can call us if they want to report an outage on our customer service line, or they can use a web form that we have online on that web page on our website to email us the outage, and we ask them to provide a certain amount of information so that we can make sure we find and fix the right light. A lot of times when we have elevated inquiries for streetlight outages, when we investigate, we find out that we didn't necessarily get enough information to find the right light. There are lots of streetlights, and if someone calls in and says there's a streetlight out on George Mason Drive, it's obviously not going to be enough information. If they give a little bit more information, then we may end up at the wrong light anyway. So we do ask specific pointed questions, whether it's on the web form or whether if they call us, our call center agents ask specific information to make sure we're going to be successful. The last thing we want is to go out, respond, and have that citizen think we never did anything because we didn't ever find and fix the right light. So, excuse me. So on our webpage, we also have now included some photos of the pole numbers so that they can maybe more easily identify information that we would need. What we also do here in this area is we use pole wraps. And what that looks like is if we have a first responder that comes out to respond to a streetlight outage, and that first responder is not able to make repairs when he's there, He can identify what the problem might be, though. He or she can identify what the problem may be, whether it's going to need some overhead, an overhead crew, a specialized overhead crew, or an underground crew. And so what we'll do at that time is we'll put a pole wrap on that streetlight. And the way we view that as customer service is that sometimes when we're out at these streetlights doing this first response work, it's at night and folks are sleeping, and they may come out the next day and that night the light's not working and they think no one's been there. When they see this pole wrap on the pole, at least it lets them know we've actually made a response. We know that the light is still out, and they can see, if they look closely at it, they can see when we were there, and they can actually even see what type of repair it is. If they go to our webpage, these pole wraps are shown on our webpage, and it gives anticipated timelines for each type of restoration. So they can see overhead repairs typically are going to take a certain amount of time. There's also information on that page about inclement weather situations that can sometimes, if we're in the middle or just following a major storm, that can tack on some additional time. Times of high volume of outages, we sometimes do, that timeline can be extended. Underground repair, same thing, that it gives some information about that. Now, the yellow pole wrap would be if our underground repair crew is out there and is unable to make repairs and identifies that we do need to replace spans of cable, one span or multiple spans of cable, we'll change that out to a yellow wrap. And again, on the webpage, or if they call our phone center and say there's a yellow wrap on the pole, we can explain that might be a more timely repair because we're going to have to go through a process to actually replace facilities. And in those cases, those are the cases where we're working with the county on a permit or making sure that we're scheduling a specialized crew. So that's, from a customer service perspective, some of the things that we've implemented in recent years to hopefully help communication with the citizens throughout the state of Virginia, North Carolina as well, but specifically here in Arlington County, where in metro areas where we do use these pole wraps to help with some of that. And that's...
Thank you very much. I think what we're going to do is take the third presentation, and then once everything's out there, maybe this will answer some of the questions that people may have. So we'll just go through all three. Thank you very much, and then open it up to the board to ask questions about anything. So thank you.
Well, thank you and good afternoon. I'm going to just provide a little bit deeper dive into this VEBCA thing. It's a mouthful, the Virginia Energy Purchasing Governmental Association. So it is a joint powers association that was formed in 2002, following over 2 decades of a less formal joint committee between VML and VACO. And that committee had negotiated terms and conditions and rates with Dominion. It was that committee was started in the 70s with the energy crisis and the uncertainties then. And then in 2002 was when deregulation and retail choice came to Virginia. And so as a block of municipalities, public bodies, it was decided that, well, we needed a structure if we were going to compete for power services and so forth. Long story short on that is that Virginia has re-regulated in 2007, and so we're not going out and purchasing power on a competitive market, but this VEBCA organization is still very much engaged with Dominion in terms of rates and terms and conditions. My slide says 172 members of various public bodies. Jerry's had 171. Pleased to report that King George County Schools is now a member of VEBCA. And I pulled from the VEBCA bylaws to give you a sense of this entity. So the members formed VEBCA to further their economic interests in the aggregation and procurement of electricity supply, electricity delivery, and other energy-related services. So again, it was anticipating competitive procurement of power, but it is still broader than that. Just as a point of information, I wanted to illustrate Dominion's retail service territory. While Dominion has transmission facilities and generating facilities throughout the state, the actual retail service of electricity is in yellow here. And so you'll see that it's predominantly in Northern Virginia outside Washington, in the Richmond Capital area, and in Tidewater. And so the retail service delivery is really along the urban and suburban corridors. VEPCA as an organization has an annual budget of about $300,000, and annual dues are apportioned by electricity load. And so Arlington's dues are about $6,600 a year. We have about 2.2% of the total load. That budget is used for legal counsel. Christian and Barton is legal counsel to VEPCA, and they've been providing services for a number of years. Technical consultants who advise us on and really go into the rate-making process and provide a thorough review of the rates and calculations used. And then the organization also serves a valuable peer exchange network. We have an annual meeting in May and gather there, in addition to quarterly board meetings. The quarterly board meetings are typically in Henrico County. The board of directors, and I'm one, I've been on the board for a number of years. We consist of 14 members. The organization is authorized for 15, so we have one vacancy right now. We are conscious of maintaining geographic diversity among the board between the three major service territories within the Dominion territory that are served. And I'd mentioned that electricity sales to VEPCA members are about 6% of Dominion's total load. And so it's a not insignificant chunk of Dominion's customer base. Another reason for this organization to exist and work through this agreement structure with Dominion is simply because local governments are a little different from your basic residential or commercial customer in that we have easements, we have streetlights, we have construction, we have pump stations, we have critical facilities. And so we inform Dominion of critical facilities, and then they have priority for restoration and so forth. So there is it's an important institutional role. Now, VEPCA has no staff. It relies on the board to pretty much move forward. Virginia Municipal League serves as the administrative agent, and they provide the secretary. And so it's a coalition of the willing on the board. The board tends to reflect the more populous jurisdictions in all those areas. When VEPCA was first formed, and including back to the VML-VACO committee, the board was, I might characterize it as largely procurement folks, general services folks, and even maybe one or two city or county attorneys. With the rising professionalization of energy management in localities, now the VEPCA board is much more consisting of energy managers and energy specialists. So getting into the agreement itself, the contract period, well, most times the contract runs 3 to 5 years. The current contract is for 4 years. It began August 1st, 2014, and expires June 30th, 2018. So this negotiated agreement, it's not regulated by the State Corporation Commission. So it's independent of the State Corporation Commission. However, it's fair to say that the VEBCA rates are largely driven or affected by the SCC rates for commercial customers. Legal counsel and the technical consultants have been able to identify various areas for savings for VEBCA due to different methods of calculation, given the certain load that the municipal customers have. One example is most years, the Dominion peak occurs in July or August, and so that's when the most expensive power is. For the VEBCA block, largely because of schools, we have a large sales of electricity, but our peak for the VEBCA block is in September, which is less expensive, and that gets reflected in a couple of the different rates and riders. It was estimated that the rates that we entered into in 2018 were going to save members about $36 million a year across the entire block, the aggregate of VEBCA members, due to these factors and this negotiated agreement. Of course, the actual savings year to year will depend upon year-to-year changes in weather and SCC decisions on what happens to those rates and so forth. Again, the agreement here, it's not a brief memo. It consists of rate schedules for small, medium, and large accounts by energy use, includes rate schedules specific to streetlights and pump stations. It includes a rate schedule for VEBCA for certified green power, which Arlington participates in. Includes rate schedules for specialty applications of very, very, very large accounts, larger than what we use. So we don't enjoy that. Riders for various capital expenditures, and these are the same riders that apply to the residential and commercial customers, but you have your base rates, and then you might notice on your bill at home there's a number of different riders for power plant construction and transmission and other things. And then fuel costs. The riders and the fuel costs are just passed through, and they can vary. The VEBCA, the VEBCA also manages its fuel costs per the agreement and per negotiation to give us a little more budget certainty because of the budgeting process of local governments. For the residential and commercial sector, the fuel factor may rise and fall somewhat dramatically. We have a way of banking savings and so forth to smooth that out for budget purposes.
John, if I could ask you to go a little faster through the last 4 slides.
And so the process toward the 2018 agreement, a negotiating committee consists of the VEBCA chair and vice chair, and then legal counsel and technical consultants. This fall and winter, this fall, Dominion is expected to send VEBCA an initial offer for the next period of time, along with supporting cost information. VEBCA will then send Dominion some items that don't have to do with revenue specifically, might concern terms and conditions, streetlights, renewable energy access, and so forth. And then through the winter and spring into next year, the exchanges between each side continues with examination of materials and probing for understandings, and this exchange continues until an agreement is reached. The VEBCA negotiating team is in frequent contact with the entire board and keeps membership informed.
What?
As for streetlights, much of this has been covered by the previous 2 speakers. The terms and conditions for the agreement overall are in a separate terms and conditions for the agreement as an entirety except streetlights. And so the terms and conditions and billing rates and processes are contained within the streetlight schedules. And as noted, right now, there are billing credits for certain outages. This gives a sense of scale. These are the 10 jurisdictions in the VEPCA membership with the largest amount of streetlights and energy consumption. For Arlington, this is about 10% of our electricity load for the county government. And lastly, we have a joint action committee that meets quarterly. This includes, it's a forum of both Dominion staff and VEPCA member staff to address systemic operational concerns. Individual jurisdiction issues, we try to resolve jurisdiction by jurisdiction through key account managers, but then for larger issues of concern to more than one jurisdiction, we take it to the Joint Action Committee for resolution. And so a number of issues have been addressed effectively in that form. And with that, I'll stop.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Have some time for board members to ask questions. Okay, I'll start. And everyone, what we'll do is we'll go same way we've done it before, just so everybody gets their one question in. We'll keep circling around until we've run out of questions or time. So my first question is, I'm obviously very personally interested in the LED conversion. How many Dominion streetlights have been converted to LED across the Commonwealth?
Right now?
Well, yeah, to date.
To date, we have, for VEPCA members, less than 300 lights that have been converted.
So I'm just curious, because we may want to know, where did they happen? What locality?
We have some in the Newport News area, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Fairfax County.
So up to 300, okay. How does, oh, that was my one question. Okay, sorry. Okay, I was going to do a follow-up. I was going to do a John Weisstedt. I'm going to skip.
Go ahead.
That was my first
Go
question.
ahead, please, take the lead.
No. We'll let's go around. Let's
Start with Adam.
say it again. Okay, go to John. We'll go the other way.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a kind of a statistical question and then looking into the future. So right now, the statistics show that Dominion Virginia Power has about 11,200 streetlights in the county, although on your chart, it looks like it might be a little higher, 11,600. Is there a reason for that discrepancy at all?
I was pulling from a 2014 database, and so there may have been some shrinkage since then.
Okay. So, and then the county at about 7,350 and VDOT at about 600. If you go back and look at the budget pages from this spring, and Mr. Schwartz, feel free to chime in here as well, there's been a steady upward trend in county-owned streetlights going from 7,350 in fiscal 16 to a projected 7,850, so an increase of about 500 over 2 years. By the same token, there's a downward trend in DVP streetlights. The peak appears to have been in fiscal 2015, 11,800, dropping by about 800 over the last 3 years, down to about 11,000. My question is, do you expect that trend to continue, and why? And do we have any particular concerns about that trend in terms of administration, cost, and that type of thing? What are the implications and takeaways from that trend?
Okay, what is really feeding into that trend is all the site plan use permit work in the county, along with major county capital projects on corridors. So anytime a block is redeveloped, that converts the Dominion portfolio over to county-owned and metered streetlights. And our current requirement is for all those lights to be LED, all the utilities to be undergrounded. When we do major capital construction where we're rebuilding an arterial street, we will often as well underground the utilities and then convert to county infrastructure. So that's what's feeding into that trend. And then we have another program that actually is adding to our inventory, which is the NC program, which is a much more incremental program where you may get pockets of county lights in neighborhoods that are mostly Dominion. We are looking at all of that as part of the SMP, which is what is the right mix between Dominion lights and county lights. The majority of the lights in the metro corridors and on Columbia Pike are at this point county, but we still have, as I showed in my graphics, some blending. And that creates, I think, some challenges for both of us. But it's very much a subject that we're looking into. What does this portfolio for both of us look like in 5, 10 years? What's the right split?
So Mr. Leach, if I could just have a follow-up question for you or Mr. Schwartz, what are the economic and cost implications of that? I mean, is this going to be because we'll be taking over, or the percentage accruing to the county will be higher and higher with each passing year as a result of development and other trends? Does that inevitably also mean a higher cost to the county as opposed to VDOT or DVP?
Well, the picture is somewhat mixed. So whenever you have an increasing inventory, that's an increased footprint that you have to maintain. You can offset some of those cost drivers by making sure that your utility undergrounding details are good, that you have that you're using conduit, you're not direct burying cable. You're putting that cable in the conduit in the right place so it's not cut. And then we as a county have chosen LED because the energy consumption, both with that technology and the ability to dim it, we're able to cut our electric use by as much as 80%. And we also get a benefit that the LED luminaire lasts much longer. A high-pressure sodium bulb generally lasts about 5 years. Some of them can last longer. Our first LEDs that have been deployed back in 2009, many of them are still in good working condition, and we expect that to continue. Right now, the LED life cycle is anywhere from 16 to 18 years. So that's lower maintenance cost of having to go out and re-lamp fixtures. So when you increase the portfolio, the net rule of thumb is you've got more to maintain, you're going to need more staff and more dollars, but you can offset that by the decisions you make with the installation and then the technology.
Okay, that's helpful. So no concrete projections or real.
Again, this is another subject for the SMP.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll actually pick up on this with my question. So, Mr. Leach, as we think about the LEDs that we've had online, have we tracked any failure rates? I mean, one of the only sort of downsides to LEDs, they're susceptible to heat buildup, and if the heat sinks fail, you can have the light fail at a substantial investment. Do we track the failure rate of these, knowing full well that when they work, they achieve all of the headline savings and benefits you mentioned?
Our experience has been that we've had very good performance, and we're putting very little wear and tear on our LED streetlights, particularly when we implemented dimming. In that, for much of the night, we're operating our LED fixtures at only 25 to 30% of the output, typical output, and so that is in effect extending the life and durability of that fixture through technology. We also have an ability to track those lights, whether they're on and functioning remotely through radio transmission.
So do you have Do you all know offhand what our failure rates are with these?
I don't. We can certainly provide that to the board as a follow-up action.
That would be helpful.
So muttering over here to the chair, I actually don't have any questions about the streetlights because I think the conversation has been so comprehensive. I can't guarantee that I won't have follow-up questions when we hear from one of those 4% of residents in the future, but I really appreciate the look. I would love to take the opportunity and just ask for John, perhaps, just a question, a little bit of sort of understanding VEBCA and how that maps onto the sort of emerging landscape about power purchasing agreements for renewable energy generation facilities, which I think is a topic we've been sort of having come to the fore recently with the APS amending its purchasing resolution to allow that. It's a conversation about putting solar panels, for example, on the roof of the new Lubber Run. Can you talk a little bit about whether VEBCA is a vehicle for that or constrains our ability to do that or enables our ability to do that? Help me understand the links between that emerging field and this existing structure.
Sure. This has been a topic that has been the whole solar and power purchase agreement. It's been a topic of frequent discussion among VEBCA members, and this is something that is likely to continue to be discussed. We think that there could be an opportunity for some kind of structured activity along the lines of a large power purchase agreement. There have been times when things that are considered non-core to VEBCA have been taken up as a subset of VEBCA. An example is back in 2005, we began purchasing renewable energy credits, which back at the time were a very novel thing, and that was a non-core activity undertaken by some members of the VEBCA association, including at the time Alexandria Schools and Fairfax County, along with Arlington. And so this is something that there is interest among some members, and it's something that I think is it's rapidly evolving.
So possibilities, sounds like possibilities. Libby, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Back to the LED light, I was surprised a little bit. I'd just like to have can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. And I'd just like to have the Dominion Power people just talk a little bit more about this issue of LED lights. We've changed and realized quite large savings. And from the presentation, I think there was a remark that there wasn't that much savings, or they didn't see that much in switching the lights, I guess because you have to change the whole light. But I assume we have to do that too. I'm not quite sure why we seem to be seeing large savings from switching to LED, and Dominion Power seems not to see that. And then I would like to also hear their general overall goal for the state on LED lights, because apparently there are only 300 now that you have. There just seems to be a mismatch. In other words, here in Arlington, we're realizing tremendous savings by switching to LED, and I get the feeling that Dominion Power isn't experiencing the same thing or doesn't see the same benefit, and why not?
There you go. Thank you.
Sure, I'll take that one. One of the things that I'll mention at first about our LED program is what we do offer is offered to VEBCA members, and it does require that VEBCA members request those upgrades. So, if we have the request, we upgrade. If we don't, we don't. VEBCA really drives the installation of LEDs on our system. But I will go a little bit further on that just to kind of answer some of your questions about the savings. From a Arlington County standpoint, for metered streetlights, you're paying Dominion for usage only through that meter. Essentially, the primary piece of your bill is usage. So you can realize savings with those LED installations because it's a more energy efficient light than what you may have installed on metered applications previously. For Dominion, the rates that we offer to our customers for LED are more for the maintenance of the entire streetlight installation. It's not as much the energy savings piece for us. It's off-peak for us from an energy perspective. So it's just a different model. It's just, from a government perspective, installing your own metered lights and contracting with Dominion to install utility-owned, maintained lights. It's just a completely different financial model. From a Dominion perspective, and right now, as I mentioned, we have a steering committee looking very closely at how we move forward with our LED program. We feel we've been smart followers in some ways, because when you're looking at complete utility mass conversion, it's a big undertaking, and we have some peer utilities that we've done some benchmarking with and tried to learn from their experiences. So there are some utilities, not necessarily with the same exact same business model as Dominion Energy, but that have had to enter into the LED technology a bit earlier than what Dominion has, and some reasons for that would be utilities that were heavy on metal halide lighting, which is, from federal regulation, really been pushed out of business, so they really didn't have a choice but to be early adopters. And what we found with benchmarking with those utilities who were early adopters of LED is that they experienced some significant challenges with, and to your point earlier, with failure rates of those early iterations in some cases. And for instance, we did have pilot programs. Arlington County took advantage of one of our pilot programs back in 2010, where we installed across the state about 10 different locations, 10 different municipalities, different manufacturers of LED, just to get a feel for it, just to track performance. Most of those LED lights did have very good performance, and still do, that exist to this day. However, we did notice that none of those lights are being manufactured today. They are all in their 3rd, 4th, 5th, 12th model. The technology continues to evolve. We did have one installation of a number of lights where we had a really high failure rate, and that company that manufactures those particular lights is no longer in business. So that's what we found with our benchmarking with some other utilities, is that they had some struggles by being an early adopter, that they were taking advantage of technology when it was very new. It's not as new as it used to be. It does continue to evolve. It does continue to come down in price and become more efficient, and performance is improved. So we feel right now at Dominion it's a really good time to work in conjunction with VEPCA and our other customers outside of VEPCA to establish that path forward for LED. We do see that as future lighting technology, especially as the sodium vapor technology is going to continue to be driven out of the market as well, just like metal halide. We just weren't forced into early adoption because sodium vapor, there's no regulations currently that's
Forces you to do it.
that. What's going to force that out, though, is the continued demand for LED. It'll be just more supply demand than federal regulation. We understand that.
Okay, thank you. That helps a bit. And I'm glad you're continuing to look at it. I understand the difficulties of being an early adopter and, maybe having some lights that didn't work so well. But as you mentioned, there seems to be quite a lot of history now. And again, it seems that you save a lot of electricity, and that your experience with electricity savings will be the same as ours, and I would think that would be in everybody's interest. Thank you.
I would just add just a data point to just emphasize what Jerry's saying. Our cost savings that Dennis has related to is in the retail rates through the VEPCA contract is between 9 and 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and their price that they are allocating towards this is probably likely below 3 cents a kilowatt hour for energy. So it's a very significant difference on how we're pricing energy and how we have to pay for energy from the two perspectives. So that's one of the reasons we've been able to experience such a significant dollar cost savings on the county side.
Yeah, and that's something I need to understand a little bit more about, because I'm going to follow up on Libby's question and my first question, which I cut myself short on. So out of your say, 200,000 or 300,000 lights across the Commonwealth, right? That's about what you have. About 300 have been converted through 2016 or 17. So on the face of it, it's just hard to look at Arlington having done 85% of our lights and you having done 0.1% of the lights. Agree with early adopter, fine, but iPhones have evolved too, but we still had one. And then you replace them and you keep replacing and getting better and better. I think it's fair to say across the country and the world, LED is not a new technology, and it's now available, and all you have to do is look at some of the experience that even communities in the Commonwealth have had to know that it's doable now. So it really gets to, from my perspective, and I think you'll see a great energy in what you've just said, now's the right time, and I appreciate that, because now is the right time. It's a little late, but better late than never, because now you'll get even the better technologies, right? And we're all going to be really involved in watching what's going on with VEPCA. But can you help me understand, and maybe you just tried to do it, Mike, but I'm a little dense on this. The financial model is different for a locality versus Dominion. If you could put that in layman's terms for me, what does that mean? Because I know our financial model is what's it cost up front, what's the operating and maintenance, what's the out-year savings or cost, and the cost of electricity too, since our goal would be to reduce the electricity usage, therefore to bring down the cost and protect the environment. So our goals are cost and the environment, the principles driving it. So how does somebody here explain to me the different financial models that makes that a different equation? Where are they the same and where are they different?
I can give you the county perspective. I'll let Dominion talk about their model. So with the county-owned streetlights, every application in Arlington, whether it is a string of streetlights or a traffic signal, everything in Arlington is metered. So we are only paying Dominion for the actual electricity that is being used. And we're paying for that electricity at the retail rate, not at a discounted rate.
Negotiated rate.
So,
right. Is that right? Or it is the VEPCA negotiated rate?
It is, but it's not a separate streetlight rate for our metered.
Sure, it's for anything the county as a
Anything
government.
that's connected.
Okay,
pays
right,
for.
but it's it's not a retail rate, what a company would pay out there, a retail.
So that is a major operating cost. So it's metered, and we pay a regular bill for every meter that we have. You, through the operating budget, directly fund staff and contract operations, maintenance and operations that would come through the pay-go budget. And then you fund capital projects, which is like relamping, installing new infrastructure, for example, on Lee Highway in Roslyn. Right. So those are the three ways you
so
fund
it's
it.
Staff, it's capital costs, and it's the energy use, which is down 75%, as according to your slide, for the LEDs over the earlier version.
Correct. So in the transportation engineering and operations area of DES, energy costs is always it's our largest single budget item, and so it's in our interest to manage that down, to try to deliver more service at less cost.
Okay. So how does that compare or contrast?
Sure, and so what I would say to that is regardless of whether the street lights in Arlington County are metered lights that the county maintains or lights that Dominion is maintaining for you, the county is still the customer of Dominion. Whether it's just for the metered lights, it's for the energy usage. When it's for Dominion street lights that we're maintaining for you, we're providing a service. So that service, and what I mentioned, we don't have a contracts person here with us today, but I won't get into the building of the rates, but the energy piece of that is a very small part of that rate. The majority of the rate is the maintenance piece. and the fixture, the capital piece of what, what the facilities cost and any material would cost.
So that's what you mean, it's built on less on the energy cost, although that seems to me that would be a factor, but
It is.
less revenue.
Yeah.
So it has a sort of a distorted impact if it's less revenue for you then. But the operating maintenance, wouldn't it be lower? I mean, this was sent out to us, which is the average cost of a LED county maintaining an LED is $7.05 per pole per month. And the average for the DVP LED is between 9 and 13 and a half. Is that right?
Well, I can't, that's data I think that the county put together, and keep in mind there are two different rate structures, one for conversions that's, I don't know if that's identified there or not, but a different monthly rate that you would pay Dominion if you're converting to LED as opposed to a brand-new installation where there were no lights
Well, and
before.
I'm trying to get away from what the rate is and already been negotiated to what the actual costs are, because then hopefully those real costs would influence what the rates would be. But isn't it less costly to maintain? I mean, you said you do every 5 years, you change the bulb whether it needs it or not, right? You change the, what'd you call it, something.
We do
Relamping, relamping. So, you relamp whether they need it or not, right? And what we're hearing is that for an LED, that doesn't necessarily get needed until 12, 14, 16, 18 years down the road. Seems to me that's a savings, so that you'd want to build into the cost of an LED versus a vapor.
Right, and that's actually the function of our rates folks that work on the negotiating team with VEPCA, is we do provide VEPCA with a cost of service, so we do that deep dive and determine what does it cost us to maintain this type of light, what does it cost us to maintain that type of light. To your point, for an LED fixture, it does make sense that the LED fixture would require less operating and maintenance expense at the fixture. Keep in mind that other pieces of how the rate's built has to do with everything besides that fixture, the source that provides the energy, the underground conductor, the pole, the wiring in the pole, all of those things are components of that in addition to the costs. And as we see LED costs coming down, the point is with LED currently, LED fixture prices are still higher than the sodium vapor fixtures that we offer. So all of that factors in. I don't know with the numbers you're looking at there, we didn't, I don't think it's apples to apples in terms of how we build a rate and how the county how a government in general looks at your O&M and your capital costs and energy savings, because for us, it's not necessarily an energy savings the same way the county as a customer would see that from an LED perspective as an LED, as a
One
energy
follow-up,
savings.
if you guys will indulge me, is when I mentioned the environment, we have our community energy plan, which sets goals for ourselves to try to reach. Does the statewide plan for energy reduction, energy efficiency, the goal of 10% through 2022 or so, or the greenhouse gas emission reductions, do those factor into Dominion's negotiations and goals at all?
I don't know. I can't really answer that question. I don't know if you have any information, Scott, on how that, we can follow up.
Deborah, maybe you can check into that for us. I mean, maybe you know the answer, I don't know.
I think we do need to check into it. The only thing that comes to one thing that comes to my mind is, I think maybe as was stated earlier, when we are building what we offer to VEPCA, and as we go through negotiations, we do look at what we are charging, the rate makeup, our plans for our jurisdictional customers, because that's vetted through the SCC and it's vetted through public hearing process. So we do use that as a guide. So all of that would factor into our resource planning.
Yeah, and I'm speaking mostly of the statewide greenhouse gas and emission goals and the statewide voluntary goal of a 10% reduction based solely on energy efficiency that, again, isn't mandated. Nobody told you had to do it as a utility or all of our utilities, but it's presumed and assumed. as a goal, and so it just strikes me as this is one of the low-hanging fruits in that regard. You got willing folks on the other side of the table to say, we'll help you reach your target, which is still a long way to go to reach it.
For
And that's
overall
why I'm
LED
curious how
conversion.
it'll be factoring into the VEPCA negotiation, which I recognize is ongoing, will be done in a year, but now is the time.
Right, and I think that the VEPCA Dominion relationship during those negotiations, that would probably be the right place to ask that question of whether or not any statewide mandates apply to that private agreement.
They're voluntary.
Or voluntary, that if that enters into the discussion during negotiations, then I don't know the answer to that, but if it does, it could impact where we are next year in terms of LED rates. Again, what we provide for LED is in negotiation with VEPCA, and what we install in the field is at the request of VEPCA members. So we're really, while we're trying to drive it internally as much as we can, and we want to understand it, be educated, and be prepared, it's really at that table that we can get to that next level.
That's a very good point, and I recognize you guys are a lot of the folks doing it on the ground, and you in particular. So maybe it's incumbent upon us to formulate that question and pose it from the board level actually to you in a different way. So I appreciate that. Yeah. John?
Thank you, Mr. Facette. So I want to come back to a practical consideration as it's playing out here. Mr. Leach, you mentioned the Streetlights Management Plan, which I know is a particularly important initiative to our county manager. And it was mentioned that there is an advisory panel, and I just wanted to get a flavor for what sort of feedback are you hearing from them? How are you tapping into their perspective and expertise? I went to the county website and I noticed that there's reference to 3 meetings that have already been held. 1 in January, 2 in February. There's no mention of a meeting which I understand is being held tomorrow night. And I'm just wondering if why there's been a gap between February and tomorrow night, if that's the case. And also, are there any members of this advisory panel here today, and were they invited to this work session?
So I'll first start that this is a county manager advisory group advising staff on developing administrative policies, practices. We spent the first couple meetings really trying to provide a grounding. There's a lot to our Streetlight program as a hybrid program, with the county controlling a little over a third of the lights and Dominion having the majority of the other lights. And so for those first couple sessions, really are trying to ground the group in the issues that we're facing. And we've gotten varying perspectives. I think more focus on issues of what we would like to see, as opposed to one of the core functions of the SMP is how do we operationally and financially ground our program and make sure that we're delivering. Could you get after?
Hey, Libby? Libby Garvey, can you hear me?
Yes, I think my mute button just came off, and I apologize. I'm trying to move.
Yeah, if you
Sorry
could
about
just
that.
be sure the mute button stays on.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Leach.
That's okay. So the first 3 meetings were really to share a lot of information with the group, and they took that information in. We are kind of at a transition phase in our study effort. We did decide that waiting until the end of the summer was too long, and so we are going to be holding a June meeting to share with the group the updates. For example, the fact that the board did adopt additional budget resources to allow us to improve customer service. That is a big deal, and we think this advisory group needs to be aware of that. I would say we've had very robust discussions about community input. and the advisory group is currently constituted, provides a variety of perspectives, but that may not fully represent the interests of the broader community. So we are having discussions about the need to do a broader-based survey using something like SurveyMonkey to try to get basically a broader input as we develop the SMP. But we will continue to meet with this advisory group through the fall.
So if I could just ask a follow-up question or two. So one of the tasks that the group has been charged with is examining new streetlight technology, and I understand that there's been talk of an RFI or an RFP, something like that. Could you just characterize where that initiative is and how the Citizens Task Force, which is composed of a number of representatives from various key commissions like E2C2 and so forth, how they're being leveraged for this process and what sort of input they're having?
Sure. So we actually shared the information about the structure of the RFI. We are seeking deployments of various types of luminaires, various types of upgraded LED technology in Arlington, and I believe that is scheduled for late summer, early fall. And we would engage not only that advisory group, but other advisory bodies to really weigh in. We're talking about field deployment, so they would be able to come look at the various forms of technology that are being deployed, much in the same way that we did when we launched LED to begin with. We relamped the whole courthouse area, and we used different products from, I think, 3 or 4 different manufacturers and left them out there for a number of months to allow our commissions and committees and the board, general public, to weigh in and give us input as we make decisions about how to proceed.
So is the actual content of, just to be clear, is the actual content of the RFI settled, or is it still a work in progress?
I think it is at this point pretty settled.
Okay. Are there any members of this task force in the audience today? Do you know, Mr. Leach?
There is not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Christian?
Yeah, this question is for John. It's just about VEPCA a little bit, and I'm just curious. You mentioned that contracts can vary from 3, I think, to up to 5 years, and it would just seem intuitively to me that shorter contracts would be better, getting a little bit more of a precision on potential cost savings and benefits, and it's going to be less likely if you go into the out year. So what drives whether it's a 3, 4, or 5 year contract, and is there a reason why it changes?
Sure. It has changed. I mean, we've gone back to, I think there was a time in 2000 when we actually had a 7-year contract. And there's a trade-off between renewing a contract more frequently and the amount of effort and analysis that goes into the construction of that agreement, and also the budgetary certainty that comes from a longer period of time. So in addition, the legal counsel will often be looking at what's going on in the Commonwealth and trying to anticipate policy factors that may swing or loom large on the horizon. Lately, we've been living in interesting times with regard to energy, and so it's becoming harder to see that horizon. Frankly, I don't know what the current thinking is. We're going to this summer have the next board meeting when we'll really start talking about the term. But it is a matter of weighing the level of effort and cost to get to the agreement, and just how nimble we need to be for emerging technologies, but also just changing policies, which can swing things to a large extent. There have been times, and I think Ms. Northridge mentioned the biannual review of the LED streetlight rate, which was done because there was an anticipation that those rates would be changing. And I believe that the current agreement, well, I'm not sure, but there have been instances where there are contract reopeners if certain events come to pass. And so that's another mechanism that the agreement holds to in case of dramatic changes.
All right, so that, I mean, that level of bargaining is terrific. I just wanted to make sure that it's not now Dominion Energy, which dictates the terms of the contract. We do have a negotiated process where the 3 to 4 to 5 year process, or I guess even up to 7-year process, we VEPCA members do have a firm say in that. That's not dictated by our partner here.
No, not at all. And I don't see a return to a 7-year contract anytime soon. But there is still the amount of, it's a non-trivial lift, the whole rate-making process with legal and technical review of Dominion's work papers on cost of service.
And if I could just do one very quick follow-up exactly along these lines, if it ever got to the point where there was technical support that was needed in order to give VEPCA members comfort with, you know, a shorter-term contract, what would be the mechanism by which you could seek that out? I mean, you're an organization, or VEPCA is an organization with limited funds. If there was the need for new consultant expertise or financial analysis or another energy expert or more legal counsel, what could you do?
The organization is solvent. I mean, it's not a it's secure, and so it's what happens is because these contract cycles come in waves. Expenses tend to be loaded toward the negotiation and agreement periods. And so there is usually some means to seek additional advice if needed. And rates have, the membership dues and the budget is reviewed every year by the board. And the budgets have been roughly constant, but there is fluctuation. And so we also have had a fund balance that we've been able to bring forward when in anticipation of negotiation periods.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, as I look over again the original presentation, a customer service question presents itself to me, which is to ask on slide 13 of that first presentation that Mr. Leach gave us, there was a note about the sort of process by which a resident makes a service request, reports a problem. I think we're all very familiar with how that process works if it's a county issue, right? And the follow-up and the information that we take. And I'm noting the comment that if the light is Dominion-owned, the county staff, rather than the resident, then inputs the issue in Dominion system. And I'm wondering how our resident would then follow up with Dominion to track the status of that problem they've reported.
Sure. If at the time that the county staff receives the information from the resident, I would assume that there's some back and forth communication on that. If the county inputs that into our system, they get an immediate work request number that they can then provide, and I assume they do. I won't speak for the county, but I would assume that that's probably their follow-up to that resident. Hey, we reported it. It's a Dominion light. Here's the work request number. With that work request number, that resident then can, going forward, if there are any questions about the restoration, they can come to us directly, whether it's through email or whether it's through a phone call with that work request number, and we can go look in the system and provide updated information.
Got it. And can the resident input the issue into Dominion system, or that's only accessible to our professional staff?
What the resident can do is the resident can can fill out a web form that asks specific questions. Residents do not have access to the streetlight outage reporting system that I mentioned. That's actually a system that's memorialized in the VEPCA contract. That is a negotiated system, and it was negotiated in the contract for Dominion to provide that system only to VEPCA members, so it's only available to the VEPCA members.
So
It's a
if
private access.
we're interested at some point in trying to make that system more available to our residents, but if we're from our staff some interest, we'd have to go through VEPCA to do it?
Correct.
Okay.
And just to follow up on the one thing, the information, the work order, you said something like that, includes the contact information for someone at Dominion. That's what you're saying?
The work request number is associated with the outage report, and a resident would then contact our customer service team, who has access to all of that information, every work request number.
The customer service
Correct.
contact information is in that work order or whatever, so they would know where to go.
And I would defer to the county to answer maybe what information gets passed back to the customer if an outage is reported directly to Arlington County. You have a phenomenal call center here at Arlington County. I sat with them on several occasions to actually train those call center agents on our system, and they do a phenomenal. If they ever have any concerns, they do contact me and say, I can't find something, or I need help. So I can't tell you exactly what they communicate, but I'm sure it's the same level that our customer service team would do, and that would be, here's the work request number, this is how you can contact us back for information about this, and right, correct, and any updates on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add that we do provide information that has been transferred to the Dominion system if it's a Dominion Light. It's not totally seamless, so that's something we're continuing to work on. I do think if it's a county light, they can find status. I think they can call Jerry to find status for DVP's updates, but we can become updated as county staff, but they have to call directly, I think, to Dominion's.
Not online, you mean?
It's not online, so that's one barrier.
Well, I think just to tie that up, I mean, maybe an opportunity for us to signal the interest at the board level, because I know it's one our staff has raised with us about trying to find a way to improve that access that our residents as well as staff have to that system. And if it means going through VEPCA, then it means going through VEPCA. But I think that is very much an interest in the name of good customer service.
Libby, did you have a second question or a second set of questions?
I did. Actually, it's just a follow-on to this one, and it may just have been because I wasn't attending as closely as I should. So I understand how it works with people reporting in problems. Could you talk a little bit about your ongoing maintenance? In other words, if you don't get a light, if a light nobody's reported that it's been a problem for 5 years or 10 years, are you out there checking on it anyway because every so many years these lights need a little attention? In other words, an ongoing maintenance program?
Sure, and I'll take that one for the Dominion lights. We do touch every light, whether someone calls us or not, at least once every 5 years. And that's part of our routine maintenance program where we will change the bulb, change the photocell, and I mentioned it earlier, do a general health check and report back any additional follow-up items that might be needed for another crew to return to that light for any repairs. And again, that's outside of our normal outage response for outages that we receive from citizens or from the county. That's a routine program, and about 2,300 lights per year, I believe, in Arlington County, we visit for that health check.
And the only thing I would add
Thank you. And that includes their cable, the underground part of it too, which is harder to see.
For the relamping, it includes the fixture, the pole. There's not really, and you mentioned underground cable, there's not really a good way to do a health check on buried underground cable. So for our underground cable, if it does fail, then we're going to investigate that, and our decision-making comes at the time that an outage is reported to us, and we identify whether or not the cable is able to be repaired, or at that time make a decision if we need to proactively replace it, if it's going to create some reliability concerns going forward for those lights.
Okay, thank you. So for the relamping and what's above ground, you've got a regular maintenance schedule that you check on. For the underground part that's harder to do, you sort of depend on when it acts up, and then you pay attention to it.
Correct.
I would just add to supplement to that answer, the county in 2016 is going county-wide with all 19,000 plus lights and riding all the streets with the TNO staff and we're entering the lights in our system that we need to fix just as a proactive measure, and we plan to do that annually, both for the Dominion system lights and ours.
Sets of lights.
That's both
Dominion
sets of
and the
lights, so it
counties.
helps supplement, and it gives a proactive nature to both the Dominion lights and the county lights.
Can I
Thank you.
do a quick follow-up on Libby's, which is the underground cabling? Because one of the things that I hear through the grapevine is that you guys actually replace, you'll fix a light. But the question becomes, at what point is it really the cabling and the light just keeps going out? And at what point do you know it's the cable and you're able to fix the problem, the systemic problem, as opposed to the symptom?
And I'll answer that from a Dominion perspective. Our first responders, when they're troubleshooting, and they can determine right when they're there at the first response, whether it's an underground issue.
And if it is, that's what's dealt with.
If it is, that's what we follow up with an underground crew. And then that underground crew then has that decision-making process. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's some internal resources that contribute to that as well. For instance, if we know that we've made repair, we have historical data on a certain span of lights that we've made underground repairs, we may make the decision to immediately send that to a cable replacement project as opposed to attempting additional repairs, understanding that it may go back out in another year or so. So we're trying to balance the decision-making of when to replace, when to repair with reliability and the resources that we have at the time as well.
Okay.
I did want to actually add one more point that we missed on checking the status of streetlights, whether they're on, and dispatching maintenance crews. One of the things that we've developed through deployment of technology is that we have transmitters in our streetlights now. They are transmitting data back to a server. When the light no longer transmits, that's a sign that that light is not working. And if we see a string, we have a way to remotely check whether the lights are on. And that's a technology that's emerged in the last few years, but it's incredibly powerful.
Sounds like a cost saver, too.
Absolutely. So I did wanted to add that we are now actively using that technology with all our streetlights that have transponders, which is roughly 85% of our lights.
So my last question, I think a couple of us have a follow-up, and that's it, and I think we're right toward the end. Have you given thought to, do you know if Dominion is open to an arrangement with a locality, like in Arlington, to take on the maintenance of your streetlights in exchange for some rate reduction in the per streetlight?
Yeah, I'm not aware of if we have a mechanism in place to be able to do that. Right now, we maintain lights based on terms and conditions and a rate structure with the VEPCA agreement, and it makes no mention of the opportunity for a county to provide some of that work. Obviously, everything's
A reduction in the rate. Obviously, there's...
Right, everything's negotiable, so that's just not something that I'm familiar with, that we would, or don't understand.
Just before, has that ever come up in VEPCA before?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Well, in terms of previous agreements, no.
Yeah, it sounds like something that probably should be explored. Whether or not it's beneficial to either side of the equation, I don't know. But it certainly is something. I mean, we've taken on streets, we've come into ownership of roads with VDOT because that expedites so much of our work at this end. Without coming into ownership, if there's a comparable understanding where some of the responsibility is taken on by the county in exchange for savings in energy costs or payments per pole, it seems like it may be worth exploring as well. That's all. I throw it out. Mr. Vice-Stat.
Thank you. So I wish we had time for a lightning round, but I'll do this really quickly, and I will have a few more questions to follow up with. So our Report a Problem app, probably in the top 5, is streetlight damaged or out, as we saw on the screenshot. Another concern that people have, maybe that is not quite as widely reported because there's sort of a resignation to it, and that is the aesthetics, if you will, of the utility pole with these giant lasso rope-like spaghetti wires and rubber-coated tubes that can adorn the upper reaches of a utility pole and also down around the base of the utility pole. And it's a frustration with people as to who owns these, who owns this stuff. Is it the telephone company? Is it DVP? Is it the county? Is it a cable provider? And there was a review of this last year, and the county response came back saying that citizens are encouraged to contact their the cable providers whose contact information is on the web, and failing that, go to the State Corporation Commission. And so that's a little frustrating when people see something like that and they don't feel empowered to be able to do anything. So I'd like your DVP's perspective and also the county's perspective on what, if anything, can be done from a practical standpoint to mitigate the spaghetti on top and around the bottom, because it's not only an aesthetic issue, but it can be a safety issue.
Just to clarify, you're not talking about live wires, you're talking about other stuff.
Presumably they're not wires, right? We haven't heard of anybody being electrocuted yet, but thanks.
Well, yes, safety.
Scott,
Safety,
dive in.
safety is a number one priority for us. So if it is a live wire or any wire, and if you have a question about it, stay 10 feet away from it. That's the company practice, and that's what we let our customers know as well. So if there is concern about the wire, treat it as it is a hot wire on the ground. As far as the aesthetic portion of it, if the county is looking to underground wires or underground lines, we have our design department that does that work all the time. So if that's something that you guys want to pursue, we can call in work requests, we can make those work requests, we can have a designer come out, meet you on site, and we can actually address what you want to see above ground and below ground. I'm not speaking for other utility companies there, but more than happy to work with you on an individual location basis.
So Mr. Schwartz or Mr. Leach?
I will just reference that there is a longstanding utility coordination meeting that takes place monthly with DES staff actually supporting that, where a whole raft of things are tracked. Every utility undergrounding project is tracked in great detail. And if there are systemic issues in a neighborhood, it can't be the one-off, a single pole, because we simply don't have the staff and capacity to assign a case manager to each single pole. But if there are ongoing problems with a corridor, those things also get tracked and get worked at the monthly utility coordination meeting, and Dominion is a regular attendee along with Comcast and Verizon. They're the big three. And yes, we have above ground utility districts. Not all of Arlington is underground, and those poles are either owned by Dominion or they're sometimes owned by Verizon.
Okay, but I'm just wondering from a practical standpoint, how do we materially improve things? I mean, we're adding what, 3 people to the Streetlights program? I mean, could potentially one of these folks be tasked or designated to maybe spearhead a better effort to coordinate this? And then, as you point out, there's undergrounding, but there's whole neighborhoods, of course, where undergrounding may be decades away because of cost. And the frustration is in these residential neighborhoods that may be far away from any undergrounding. But the other and related question is, when there is undergrounding and the pole goes dark or becomes fallow or whatever, how long is it before that pole gets taken down and you've got a pole on one side of the street and a shiny new standalone streetlight on the other side of the street? Explain that dynamic, and what about the, okay.
We're over time
okay.
now, so let them answer those.
That was a nested question, so I'll try to.
Yeah.
I'll start with the resource issue. Historically, given the growing portfolio of county streetlights, we are substantially under-resourced to maintain the streetlight infrastructure that we have. So the FTEs that you approved in the FY17 budget really are to shore up the operation and maintenance of the base program. And so there are no available FTE hours in that to do this other type of work. Even with the resources, we are still probably not going to meet customer expectations for repairs. I think we're going to get a whole lot better this year, and we're going to track it. I will say on your second point, in terms of where work is being undertaken through site plans or capital projects that might be funded by the county, I reference back to the monthly utility coordination meeting. Every action is tracked. The utility spreadsheet, I think, is now 30-some pages, where entries get added every month, the status gets discussed every month, and when we fund a utility undergrounding project, the process is the duct bank gets installed first. That's very disruptive. And then one by one, the utilities, generally Dominion is the lead, transfer utilities from above grade to below ground. And then the very last thing that happens is that the poles are removed. Once all the utilities are stripped off, and there's a hierarchy on the pole, you can tell like where the wire is in terms of what it's likely to be. Once all that's transferred underground, and the wires are all off, then those poles do come out. But I assure you that this is tracked in excruciating detail, because I get the 32-page spreadsheet every month.
We'll follow up. Thank you, Mr. Leach.
Be happy to share it with you.
Thank you. And I'm just going to summarize this, and really, it's thanks to the staff for, I think we accomplished a lot of our goals in trying to understand how some of the new resources will be applied. I think there was a lot of great discussion with you all about customer service across the board and about the LED, the interest. I think you sense it in that conversation about conversion for all those broader reasons. So I want to say in the end, thank you to you all for coming today. I don't think there's an organization we interface with on a regular basis that does a better job of communicating with the staff in particular, keeping all of us updated. When there's a weather emergency coming, I know the emails are coming from you guys with who to touch base with, who's available, who, if you have a problem, call us. So we know you're available. Scott, thank you for even the way you responded to the last question, sort of offering to problem solve, whether it's a one pole or a system of poles, a systemic issue. So again, thanks. You'll obviously be hearing from us, or others will, around this VEPCA. I think we all learned what VEPCA is. We may not know what this acronym stands for still at this moment, but we know what the function and the purpose of that group is, and how honestly significant they are to helping us in Arlington achieve some of our longstanding goals. So again, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Mr. Facette, if you can convene us into closed, and also Ms. Garvey, we will call you from the back conference room once we are ready.
Okay, I move that the county board convene a closed meeting as authorized by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1 for the purpose of discussing two personnel matters involving employees appointed by the county board.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Crystal. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. We are in recess. Thank you. Closed session recess.